Hey everybody, Steve here with Local Level Podcast. I'm sitting here today with Stacey Kalamaras, founding partner. Is it partner?
Yes.
Founding partner of Kalamaras Law Office.
Yes.
You're an intellectual property attorney and advertising specialist as well?
Yeah. IP and so trademark, copyright, and advertising law are my areas of focus.
And we had a conversation beforehand. You have many different careers that you went through.
A couple.
Yeah. And it ties it all together, what you're doing right now. So with a specialty in advertising, but let us, if you can, tell the audience how you got your start.
Sure. So my first career was as a marketing and advertising executive. So I worked for a number of multinational corporations here in Chicago, and I also worked for Miller Brewing in Milwaukee, which is kind of sad what just happened last week.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, wow.
Up there. So
you were actually up there? Was that where you worked?
that is exactly where I worked, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Not in the plant, but in the executive offices of Miller before they were acquired. So so that was before the acquisition. So they were owned by Kraft and Philip Morris at the time that I worked there, and then they were sold to South African concern called SAB, and then SAB sold them to Coors. So that's sort of the timeline there. So that was about 20 years ago. I worked there just for about 6 months before I went to law school. So if you just sort of see it through, when I originally graduated from college, I thought I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was a kid. But when you see lawyers on TV, you see prosecutors and you see defense attorneys, right?
Yeah,
and maybe
criminal stuff.
Right, and maybe you know a divorce attorney or maybe you know a real estate attorney, but that's kind of it. That was my world. So I thought I wanted to be a prosecutor. I thought I wanted to put bad guys away.
Right.
And when I graduated from college, I prepared to go to law school. I took the test. It's called an LSAT to get into law school. And I was accepted and I was ready to go. But I was working as a receptionist for a small law firm in Northbrook. And I saw how the women there were treated, not by their male colleagues, not by the other lawyers, but by the clients.
Wow.
So I was a receptionist. So I greeted everyone. I let the other attorneys know who was here to see them. And there was one client in particular. He was in a lot of tax trouble. And the managing partner was trying to sort of calm him down and get him to the right person to help him. And it just so happened that there were two female partners in the firm. I think there were 5 or 6 partners in that firm. And one of the female partners was an expert in tax law.
Okay.
And so this managing partner said to this gentleman, look, I'm going to pass you off to my partner so-and-so. And the client was just arguing with him. He's like, no, I don't want her. And they're sitting like maybe 8-10 feet away from me. He's like, when are you free? I'll come back. And he's literally clutching his, jewel paper bag full of receipts. He was in serious trouble with the IRS. It wasn't just to prepare his tax return. He was being audited or he was being, accused of certain
You would think that he'd
issues.
be willing to take anybody's help at that point, right?
Or the person who was capable of assisting him,
yeah.
right? And so the managing partner said, "No, look, Joe, or whatever his name was, if I were in trouble, I would want her to help me."
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing all this play out over about 10 minutes, and it's the summer. I'm going to go to law school that fall, and I had just graduated from college, and I went home to my parents' house that night.
Sure.
And I said to my mom, I said, you won't believe the craziest thing that happened. I mean, I believed the Virginia Slims commercial, right? I believed we had come a long way, baby. And clearly we hadn't. And so that's how I sort of begged off of law school. I asked my dad, that I told my dad I wasn't ready to go. Yeah. And so he's like, well, then you better go get a job. What do you want to do? And I just knew I wanted to work in sales and marketing. I had no idea what brand management was. That came later for me.
Right.
And I fell into this job. I did various things in marketing communications and marketing and not really sales, but just sort of general marketing roles for small companies. And I had a marketing communications agency of my own in my early 20s because I was arrogant and I thought I knew better than everybody else.
Of course, yeah.
And then I fell into this role at the NutraSweet company, and I started working with attorneys who do what I do now. And it was just eye-opening for me. I had no idea what intellectual property law was. I had no idea what it meant to protect a brand from a legal perspective. And so I was 27 when I finally made my way to the NutraSweet company, and it was just really interesting to me. There were in-house attorneys, we had outside counsel, so I saw all these people making a living protecting brands from a legal perspective, and I just got bit by the bug.
What did you like about it most?
It was interesting to me. I can't say for sure, but it was just fascinating because it was just very different from anything I had seen on TV. It was a way to be a corporate lawyer, but also I really liked marketing. And so it was a way really to be kind of
The creative part.
yeah, a lawyer that really protected brands.
Yeah.
But I was having such a great time in my marketing career. I think I asked all these lawyers all these questions, and for me it was really interesting, but I just wanted to learn everything that I could. So
Right.
because I was on my way to law school, I had this very sort of traditional liberal arts education in political science and philosophy. And so when I started at the NutraSweet company, I went to school part-time for my MBA to bolster my business education.
Sure.
And then I just reached a point, Miller was many years later. That was sort of the end of my marketing career. I knew I was going to law school then, so I was just biding my time. That was about 12 or 13 years later. But I just reached a point throughout my career. I worked for the NutraSweet company. I worked for Alberto Culver. I worked for a German candy company called Stork. People probably know their brands called Werther's Original and Reason Chocolate Chew and Mamba and Toffee Fay and all sorts of those fun brands.
Sure.
And then I moved to Milwaukee because I was working for an advertising agency, and I worked on the Bird's Eye frozen vegetable business and some other smaller brands.
Was that, weren't they one of the first people to make the TV dinner? Was it Bird's Eye? Or who? Swanson, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think they may have teamed up with Bird's Eye.
Yeah, I know there's some sort of
There
connection
may
there.
have been some co-branding. You may be right.
Yeah. I vaguely remember reading a story about that.
That could very well be. Yeah. So we landed the Bird's Eye business. I was part of the I was part of the team that helped bring that business into the agency from a promotional standpoint. My area of focus as a brand manager was really on the promotion side. So all those coupon inserts you see in the Sunday newspaper.
Right.
And any sort of on-pack promotions, that was really my area of focus as a marketing manager. And when I worked for Stork, the candy company, I was the general manager of our business in Puerto Rico. So I helped launch all of our brands in Puerto Rico, which was a really interesting experience for me.
To see it in a smaller scale?
Yeah, so I really was helping to sell, and I called on Walmart in Puerto Rico in connection with our national accounts manager there, and I worked with our distributor, and so I did more than marketing. I was really kind of a little mini general manager of the whole island, which was a lot of fun for me. It was an interesting skill set. That was a super fun company to work for.
Yeah, I can imagine. Whenever if you're doing it in the United States itself, that's such a huge area.
Exactly.
When you can kind of drill in at a smaller, just an island basically.
Yeah.
That has to be, a lot.
It was a lot. It was a lot of fun, and it was a really interesting experience for me. But I think I reached this point. Most brand managers really love the advertising side. They like the shooting commercials.
Right.
They love kind of the sexiness of all of that. For me, I didn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
I loved the business end. I loved forecasting. I loved budgeting.
The numbers.
I loved the numbers. I liked the analytical end a lot.
Yeah.
And I found myself, there's kind of this natural tension between between marketing and legal. And the marketers don't like the legal department. They sort of view them as killjoys.
Yeah, I want to use whatever song I want.
Right, exactly. And I found myself siding with legal all the time.
Wow.
And I found myself being the voice of legal in all of these meetings as we were developing either new line extensions or new brands. And my colleagues depended on me, right? They knew that I was sort of the liaison between marketing and legal. So when there was a question, they would say, "Hey, Stacey, what's that rule again?" I didn't really know what the rule was. I mean, let's be honest, I wasn't a lawyer at that point, but
You knew where to find it, though.
well, I was the person who routed everything through legal. So I understood what their direction to us was. I certainly did not know the rules, but in team meetings and cross-functional meetings, my colleagues would depend on me to sort of relay that information back.
So would you say that you kind of could speak the language? You were the legal whisperer to them?
No,
Or-
I think understanding where I am now, I think I was functioning more as a paralegal.
Okay.
Now looking back and understanding now what I know
Sure.
and how I was functioning more probably like a paralegal. Because I was really that liaison, that bridge between marketing and legal, and trying to really make things more efficient so that our in-house lawyers especially were not spending so much time reviewing mundane things. But so after about, 10 or 11 years, Stork was sort of my last very senior position on the brand side. And I was like, well, I think I need a change. And so my change came in moving agency side. I thought that was the change that I needed in my career. I was growing restless. I needed a new challenge. So I went agency side. So that's how I ended up on the advertising agency side and working on the Bird's Eye business. And that was fine. But that wasn't the change I needed. So I sort of view that as the evolutionary step before
Right.
the revolutionary
Stepping stone.
step. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we lost the Bird's Eye business at that particular agency almost as quickly as we got it. And that was just because Bird's Eye was an interesting account. They were owned by a co-op of growers. And then shortly after we earned the business, the co-op decided to sort of sell themselves or divest themselves of the co-op. I didn't really understand how it all worked. And within about 8 months of earning the business, we lost it.
Was there a reason that you can point to looking back, in hindsight?
I think it was just the ownership of how they structured it.
Okay.
So they were, again, I don't understand how co-ops work.
Yeah.
And so, so for me in the role that I had now, the agency had huge advertising clients, but I was a account executive, an account director in the promotions group. We didn't have a second largest client. So then I worked on a bunch of little clients, and I thought, you know what? I used to manage $500 million brands.
Yeah, it wasn't. You were punching way below your weight.
Exactly. That's a really great way to phrase it. And I thought, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
So I left. I resigned. And I was like, now I wonder what's next. And in looking for what was next and trying to figure out what was next, there was a temporary position advertised at Miller.
Oh, okay. Back to that. Right.
Right. So that's how I got to Miller. And it was just kind of a 2-week thing, but it spawned into this larger assignment.
And this was all before you actually went to law school.
It is.
So this is,
Yeah.
I mean, you just laid out a lot of different things. You picked up lots of experience before
Yes.
you even got.
Yes, exactly.
To
Yeah.
take
And
the
so I
test.
had finished my MBA before I moved to Milwaukee. So it took me forever. It took me
Yeah.
almost 5 years. But so
You said you did that part time.
yeah, so I did that at night. So I earned my MBA in marketing.
So much work.
And then I moved to Milwaukee. So while I was at Miller, I started doing a lot of soul searching and honestly a lot of career testing. And I was playing with a couple options. And I used to live in Palatine. I used to own a condo here. And I'd finally sold my condo here. And I was renting in Milwaukee. And I thought, well, I'm sitting on all these proceeds from my house. I don't know, what am I going to do? I wasn't really sure I was going to stay in Milwaukee. I was thinking about moving back to Chicago. And so, again, all of this together, right? The soul searching, the career testing. When I took the career testing, it was very, very interesting. A number of career options that I was considering sort of rose to the top with the results. And one of them was judge and lawyer. And because that was something I had considered before, I thought, that's
not?
really, really interesting. So I retook the LSAT because your scores are only good for 3 years.
Okay.
I reapplied to law schools because I was living in Milwaukee. Marquette was one of the schools I applied to. And then I applied to a bunch of schools in Chicago. And the folks at Miller were like, if you go to Marquette, like maybe
We'll take care of it.
no, that would have been great. But they're
Oh.
like, maybe you can work here part-time. And I was like, you know what? My MBA just almost killed me. I don't think I want to do law school part-time. It's too,
That's so much.
well, it's just such a different experience. And it was too important to me because it was going to be a complete career change. And
Yeah.
then I ended up coming back home and I went to John Marshall and they gave me a partial scholarship and was 34 when I started law school. So
I was going to say, I mean, this was after, like you said, you had already been through so many different things, and that had to take many years for you to get to the point where you were before you even changed careers.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you were 37, you said? Or
I was
what did you-
34 when I
34.
started and 37 when I graduated. So I went full time. I gave up my career. I knew I was going to go full time. So the partial scholarship was helpful. I was old enough to know that that was free money. I would never have to pay back.
Right.
I was fortunate. My college education was paid for by my parents. My MBA, for the most part, was paid for by my employers. I had 3 classes that I ended up having to pay for myself because when I was at Stork, I was close to finishing, and then I was just getting overwhelmed, and I was close to quitting, and I thought this is crazy. So before it was in vogue to actually quit a job, in 1999, I actually quit my job and took a sabbatical to finish my last 3 classes, and then I ended up moving to Milwaukee to go agency side. So
Yeah.
for the most part, my MBA was paid for by my employers, which I'm grateful for. But so
It's huge.
for me, I made the decision to invest in law school, which was a no-brainer because I was lucky enough to have my prior 2 degrees paid for.
So what did you do? Because you said you took a sabbatical. Obviously there had to be expenses. How many years? So you did 4 years of schooling for the law
It's
school?
3 years when you go
3
part-time.
years.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I asked my parents. So I had sold my house before I moved to Milwaukee, and I was renting.
Gotcha.
So I moved home. I asked my parents if I could live with them. I don't recommend adult children living with their parents.
I couldn't imagine.
But I did that for 2 years again, so I didn't have to take out loans for living expenses. My last year of law school, I did get a small apartment downtown. But for 2 years, I lived with my parents. And so living expenses, food was taken care of. And then I applied for loans. It works much differently today, I understand, but you can get federal loans and then private loans to close the gap.
Sure.
And then my last year, and then I had a summer job. Between my first and second years of law school, I actually studied abroad.
Oh, wow. Where at?
In Argentina.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to study abroad in undergrad, and my mom forbade me because she thought I was following a boy to Spain.
Uh-oh.
So I didn't have the opportunity to study in a Spanish-speaking country when I was in undergrad, and I thought, I'm a grown woman. No one's going to deny me this opportunity now.
Yeah, right.
And it was really quite an interesting experience because when you do it in law school, the classes are in English, but you are in class with native speakers. So I had Argentinian students in my class, but the instruction was in English.
So you're learning the laws of the United States?
No. So the
This is
courses,
international law?
yeah, the courses I took were, I took Latin American constitutional law.
Oh, wow.
I took Latin American human rights and Latin American commercial law.
And this had to tie from the Puerto Rican experience that
It
you had
was
from some point.
it was of interest to me, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but I had Argentinian students in my class, and I chose to live with a host family. So I lived with a woman who was about my age, who had an 18-year-old son in college.
Wow.
So I wanted that experience of having the
Full immersion.
I wanted the experience that I was denied when I was 18. It was super, super fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's a great story.
Yeah, I loved it. So that was my first summer, and then my second summer I worked. I didn't get like the big job, but I worked for a solo practitioner, so I earned a little bit of money, and I also took classes to make my load a little bit lighter. But yeah, I mean, I graduated with a lot of debt. I graduated with $150,000 worth of debt.
Wow.
A lot of kids graduate with $200,000 or more.
Any of it. Yeah, that's, I mean.
It's a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot. And yeah, So it's a true investment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really boils down to how you use it, what
Right.
you make of it, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you're looking back, I can't imagine that you feel like you didn't use it, or do you feel like it was money well spent? Was it?
I do. So I was very fortunate. So a couple of things happened to me along the way. So there is ageism and there's sexism still in the
Sure,
law,
of course.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
For me, while it would have been great to live in Milwaukee and work at Miller and have that kind of a salary while I was going to law school, I wouldn't have been able to graduate in 3 years. So a part-time program is usually 4 years. Sometimes it takes people longer. But I knew that was a deal breaker for me because I knew I had to graduate before I was 40. 40 is a real critical number when you're a woman in the law. And I knew I had to do really, 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 really well.
Yeah, you're working. I would imagine that when you're getting to that age range, you're competing against people that are at your age but have more experience as opposed to.
Well, you're competing against kids. I mean, when I was a first-year associate, partners were my age colleagues,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So, when you're 37 years old, if you go straight through, you're 26 when you graduate. So when you're 11 years later, you're your partnership material if you work at a large law firm. So
Right.
people who were my age were partners. They were my bosses. They were my contemporaries. For me, it was just really critical not to defer the experience. And I knew I had to do really, really well. So I graduated with honors from law school. That was really important to do as the very best that I could do to have the most opportunities available to me. Again, because I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to leverage my background in marketing and I wanted to leverage my MBA. So I knew I wanted to be an IP lawyer. It's very difficult to dictate what you want to do as a young lawyer. Most of the time you just, you're a graduate and you say, well, so here I am,
Who's ready to hire me?
Yeah, put me to good use, law firm. And so the career services offices in law school aren't really set up to deal with people like me. And there are a small percentage of us who had prior careers who are very focused on what we want to do. And they're not really set up well to deal with people like us who are very focused.
Yeah.
So the advice I got wasn't great advice,
What was that? What advice did you get mostly?
That I couldn't be focused in IP.
Like it wasn't realistic.
It wasn't realistic, right? That I couldn't have, that my resume could only be one page. And I was like, look, I've already been working for 12 years. No, it has to be one page. Well, that's impossible. It can't be. That's stupid.
It's like throwing your experience out the window.
Right, exactly. And I interviewed with some people who basically said, it's great to meet you. So I don't want to talk about any of this, meaning my prior experience. So tell me about you. And I would stand up and say, it was really nice to meet you. Thanks so much. I think the interview's over. And they were like, well, no, wait a second. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No, everyone has this. I said, no one has this. So if you don't get that, then thanks so much. And it was great to meet you.
Do you think that they were looking at it as like, they didn't even want to hear it because maybe they looked at it like it was just padding on your resume?
No, I just think they didn't understand. I think I was being discriminated against because I was a woman.
Huh.
Yeah, I do.
Wow.
It's just, law is just an interesting field. So for me, it took me a little bit, to get back to your question about was it worth it, it was for sure worth it. But for me, it just took me a little bit longer to find my footing because I was so focused. But when I found the right place for me, it was absolutely the right place for me. It just took me a little bit longer.
Well, you own it. It has to be a lot more rewarding when you get to do your own thing the way that you want to do it after all the hard work.
Yeah.
You own it more.
Yeah.
As opposed to falling into something because you kind of just ended up there.
Yeah.
So there is a difference there that is substantial, I would imagine.
I started my career in what we refer to as big law. So I worked for, one of the, largest law firms in the country. About 2% of lawyers end up working there.
Yeah.
And while I do consider myself very lucky, I worked really, really hard.
Yeah,
In
it
my
sounds like it.
3 years of law school, I sent out over 500 resumes looking for a job. So while you can say I was lucky, it didn't just fall in my lap.
Right. It's hard work.
I worked hard for that. And for a number of years, I kept a file of every cover letter and resume I sent out and every rejection letter I got.
Wow. So what was the purpose? Because everybody has a different answer for this. So was it something that what was the takeaway when you looked at those files? What did you get from that? Did you get like, haha, see?
No, for me, it was the marketer in me. So it's a volume game, right?
Okay.
So
Yeah.
any marketers in the audience know, right? Like a great response rate is like 2%.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a law of averages. So it's like,
exactly.
Right.
So to any sort of direct mail piece, and I was sending resumes unsolicited.
so the resumes are receipts, basically.
Exactly.
So you got the receipts to prove it.
Exactly. Exactly.
Makes sense.
And also, some of my colleagues were like, well, you're so lucky, like that job just landed in your lap. And sometimes I
Yeah.
would just throw my file at them and be like, really? Seriously?
Yeah.
Like, this is what you think is lucky? How many resumes did you send out this year?
Wow.
It wasn't luck. I mean, look, right? Whatever that saying is luck is where hard work and opportunity intersect, or
Sure.
whatever that saying
There's
is.
a lot of sayings.
Right. But I think that's one. So yes, I do consider myself very fortunate. But
But you worked for it, though.
I worked for it. I didn't.
Right.
I didn't sit back. I did well in school. I did what I needed to do. I scouted like every firm I possibly could. And I'm here to tell you, Steve, it was scary for me.
I'm sure it was.
When I turned my attention to DC, because it was very clear to me that it just wasn't going to happen for me in Chicago, which was sad because my first niece was born in my second year of law school. I can't remember now. Second year of law school. And I didn't want to leave her. But it was clear that I had to. And one of my professors asked me if I had considered DC, and somehow I missed the 8th grade field trip to DC. So I didn't know anything.
I didn't have one of those either. So.
Okay. I feel better now.
Yeah.
So I didn't know anything about DC. And so when I went, I really, really liked it there. So when I focused on DC, things did come together kind of easily for me. And because my trademark and copyright professor had worked there, she sort of helped me connect with people and offer up suggestions, and everyone I spoke to had other suggestions. And once I focused on DC, it came together pretty quickly for me. And there were a group of people that were really instrumental in helping me with my job search in DC.
Do you think that, and I don't want to cut you off.
No, you're
but
fine.
Do you think that the culture in DC is one that majority of the people are outsiders? People are not actual, they're all transplants.
Yeah.
And there's so much turnaround with the political cycles and things like that. Is that?
I think that could be part of it. There's a strange kind of element in Chicago, and my professor explained it this way, and it's not that she's from here, it's just she's a brainiac. Because Chicago is part of the old industrial revolution.
Yeah, there's old roots.
Well, it tends to be a patent-heavy town.
Okay.
And I don't practice patent law.
Oh. Wow.
So IP is broken into 3 branches: patent law, trademark, and copyright. So
Okay.
I practice trademark and copyright, but not patent. And so a lot of the firms that have intellectual property groups in Chicago rely on their patent attorneys to do all 3.
Okay.
In almost every other city, it's very distinct. And patent attorneys practice patent law, but you don't have to have a technical degree to do trademark and copyright. And in fact, you shouldn't. But Chicago is very tied to, if you want to be, it's changing, but slowly, even now, 15 years later. If you want to be an intellectual property attorney in Chicago, most firms think you must be an engineer to even do what I do now, which is just kind of preposterous. So that's why.
An engineer, though. So an engineer for what reason?
Because that's who patent attorneys are.
Okay, you got to explain that for me and for the audience.
I'm not sure that I can.
Okay.
But engineers typically become patent attorneys. So that's the technical background that patent attorneys have. And so Chicago historically, and again, it is changing, but slowly. In Chicago historically, if you want to practice intellectual property law, even what I do, Chicago firms certainly 15 years ago would say, sorry, you want to do trademark law, you have to be an engineer. And I would say, why? That has nothing to do with brands.
So you have the same question I do.
So I was completely shut out
Right.
of the Chicago IP market because I wasn't an engineer. And it has nothing to do with trademark and copyright law.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with being a patent attorney. That's fine.
Okay.
Don't ask me to explain it because I don't know, because patents make my head spin.
Okay.
And I do nothing with patents.
Yeah. Okay.
So I found DC much more friendly towards me. And I found just the IP community sort of segmented the way it should be. There's patent attorneys and then there's trademark and copyright attorneys.
People have their specialties. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And some people do both, and that's great. But there wasn't this this feeling of, oh, you're not an engineer. Oh, you don't have a technical degree. Well, then you can't be a trademark attorney. And so people were very welcoming of my background. They understood my background. They saw a lot of value in my background, clearly, because I was their client.
Yeah. That was the thing that really resonated with me during our conversation, that you are coming from it with the background on both ends.
Right.
I mean, it's really, really important to be able to understand your client.
Right.
You know, and get yourself in their mind,
Right.
in their shoes. So you have that. Do you have any specific stories that you can share where that really sets you apart from the other people?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is the kind of story you're looking for, but I landed my first client 3 months into my legal career. Not because I was a great attorney. I still didn't know anything really about the law, but because, and it was my aunt at, some church picnic who ran into this woman. She was formulating her own cosmetics line and she was telling her about me, and this lady ended up calling me and we had a conversation. And I'm sure I didn't wow her with my legal expertise, but I made her feel comfortable.
Right.
Because
that's so important.
I understood what she was trying to accomplish. And I gave her the peace of mind that, at my firm, we could absolutely help her and we could protect her brand and we could help her do what she wanted to do. And, I got off the phone with her and I walked into my partner's office and I said, I just landed a client. And my partner looked at me like I was nuts. She goes, what do you mean you just landed a client? And I said, I need to send her an engagement letter. And I had no idea how to do that. I didn't know how to do any of that. I mean, I think I had been at the firm. I started there in February, and I think this was like right before Memorial Day.
Wow.
But again, it wasn't because I was an exceptional lawyer. It was because I understood how to talk to this woman, how to make her feel comfortable. And that's something that I still to this day teach young lawyers, that our clients, for what we do, we're not bailing people out, right? We're not defending people of DUIs. No one's being accused of murder, right? I mean, what we do in helping people grow their brands, protect their brands, if someone gets a cease and desist letter that their name is similar to someone else's, that is very concerning. Yeah. But at the end of the day, we don't cure cancer, right? No one's being accused of a crime. Our clients have business issues. And so it's so important to understand their business to the best of your ability, and everyone's going to have a different learning curve on that.
Definitely.
But our clients don't have legal issues. They come to us with a business question, a business issue, and our job as intellectual property lawyers is to offer a legal solution to their business issue.
Guidance.
Right. No one calls us up. I don't care where you work. If you work at one of the largest law firms in the world, or if you're at a solo or small firm like I operate now, no one calls us up and says, oh my gosh, I have the most serious burning legal question. No, they don't.
Right.
They call you up and say, someone just sent me this really scary letter. Do I really have to change my name? what they're saying is, because that would really suck for my business.
Oh yeah, that could be earth-shattering.
Yes, it's a huge distraction. It's costly. And what in the world are my customers going to think? How will they find me tomorrow if I have to change my name? That's really what's at stake. That's what that means. So we have to use our legal experience and know-how to figure out, well, do they really have to? Is there,
What's the answer most of the
well,
time?
it depends. I mean, there is no clear-cut answer. It depends. It's so fact-specific.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
A lot of the time the answer is yes, especially if they haven't, done their due diligence up front, if they haven't done a search. But sometimes, a lot of times the answer is no, that sometimes, they just get some ridiculous letter on the other side of someone just beating their chest, trying to scare them. It really is so fact intensive. But you can't evaluate that on your own. You really need to talk to someone who has specialty in that area.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's something that is not it's not something you want to play around with and take the chance. I would imagine it's worth spending the money to make sure that it's done right.
Well, or at least talking to someone so you can make an informed decision.
Right.
And the other thing that I love is I get calls all the time from small business people, and they say, yeah, so I just got this letter from XYZ big company. I mean, they can't make me stop. And I say, oh, great. Well, it sounds like you've got this all sorted out. And I say, and is this the second, third, or fourth letter you got from that big company? And then I can hear the wheels turning, like, get out of my head.
Yeah.
And they go, well, it's the third. I mean, I just threw the other ones away. And I go, how's that working out for you? Did the letters stop because you threw it away?
Yeah.
The letters are not going to stop. They're going to keep sending the letters. If you ignore them, they are going to file a lawsuit. So you don't want to monkey around, especially if you're getting a letter from a big company. I know it seems scary, and I know it seems like if you just bury your head in the sand, it will go away, but it won't go away. You definitely want to call someone, and it may be that it can be distinguished, or it may be that you just have to bite the bullet.
Now, this is an interesting part of this conversation. What I want to hear is both sides of it, because I know that there's a lot of people that will just send letters out. They'll just send letters out to get you to stop, or to scare you, and there's nothing behind it, and they never actually sue you. But then there are the ones where it's earth-shattering and it shuts you down. Do you have any stories that you could point to where somebody, like you said, ignored the letter, let it go too far, and then got ruined? Or do you have anything like that?
I don't know that I have anything like that.
Because they called you.
No, not always. Not always. I don't know that I know of any examples off the top of my head where that happens. But, there can be ethical issues too if people just send letters out and don't intend to follow up. I mean, look, there are trolls in every facet of IP, patent trolls, copyright trolls, and trademark trolls. But usually if someone has a good faith belief that there's something behind it, they're not meaning to just, scare the bejesus out of you. And usually, if you don't respond, they'll usually send, 2 or 3 letters, before they file a lawsuit. But they usually will file a lawsuit if you don't respond, if you truly ignore them. And the goal here is not to try to put someone in financial ruin. The goal is to try to get your attention with the lawsuit to bring you to the settlement table. I educate a lot of small business owners, and the one thing I always say is, 2 things. Don't ever send your own cease and desist letter. Always confer with an IP attorney if you think someone is infringing your rights. And similarly, if you receive a cease and desist letter, don't panic. That's A. I mean, it could be that you do have to make some adjustments, but there could be arguments where it isn't an issue. I can give you an example. A patent attorney that I work closely with, one of his clients received a cease and desist letter, and it wasn't that there was no basis for it. I can understand from the lawyer who sent the cease and desist letter where they were coming from, but they were a little, they were taking some liberties with the law. And so my point back to my colleague was, I don't think that this is defendable. And I would write back and say that your client's use is not what we call trademark use. So I think that, either we can have a conversation about it, we can go to court and argue about it, we can do a declaratory judgment. There's a lot of different things. My colleague is a litigator, so, he wanted to just march into court and try to fight it on declaratory judgment grounds. Most people don't do that because it's very expensive for the client. But just because someone objects doesn't mean that they're right.
Right,
So
of course.
there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And unfortunately, trademark law is just one of those areas of the law that is incredibly fact intensive, and sometimes it can straddle the line a little bit.
One of the things that comes to mind is I have this example, which is a podcast.
Okay.
A podcast, you don't have to file, you don't have to have a business entity, you don't have to file paperwork. All you have to do is come up with a logo, come up with a name, and start doing it. For the most part, that's what people do. When you start really making money and doing business, then you start doing the business side of it. But it's a worldwide thing. Where does the law end with that?
Well, so there's two things, and you bring up a great point. You don't ever have to have a registered business for anything that you're doing. And secondly, you're not required to register your trademark at the USPTO to have trademark rights.
It's just a use, right?
Exactly. In this country, we have something called common law rights. So as soon as you start using something, it has to be used as a trademark, though. And this is what confuses people all the time. Your business name is not necessarily a trademark.
Yeah, people operate as a DBA, things like that.
Well, yes, but just because, so I give this example all the time when I teach, right? So your business name could be Steve and Stacey Are Best Friends, Inc., right? It could be a holding company for many different types of brands, right? The example I like to give is look at SC Johnson and Sons or Procter and Gamble.
Yes,
right.
That makes sense.
Even though P&G arguably is its own brand, that's not the entity. The entity is Procter and Gamble Company. Under the Procter and Gamble Company, we have many different brands. We have Charmin, we have Tide, we have Oil Valet, right? We have all of these wonderful brands that Procter & Gamble has brought to us. When you go up north and look at SC Johnson, we have Raid, we have Fantastic, we have Off, we have Glade, all of these brands. Those are the brands, right? So under this fictitious company that you've just formed, Stacey and Steve Are Best Friends, Inc., right? You could be operating a podcast. You could be operating a restaurant. You could be operating all sorts of different things. If those things that you're doing are branded with a trademark and or a logo, then those are your trademarks as long as you're using them. Trademarks are territorial, both in geographic scope and according to the goods and or services for which they're used. So if you have a podcast that is branded and someone else is using that name, let's say for laundry detergent, the two can coexist. The example that I often use is Delta. We have Delta faucets and we have Delta Airlines.
That is a very good example.
The reason they coexist and both are on the register of the United States Patent and Trademark Office is no one is going to step foot on a Delta airline, right, on a Delta plane and say, damn it, I thought I was coming into the, Home Depot to buy a Delta faucet. You're not going to be confused. Likely confusion is the standard. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, and the exception is for famous marks. Famous marks, that's a doctrine in the Trademark Act. Famous marks have to be proved. They have to be litigated. Starbucks, for instance, is one of those marks. It has been deemed famous. So even though Starbucks is registered for coffee and retail store services selling coffee, you can't launch a brand of Starbucks or anything similar like Starbuck
Right.
for cheese or for gym shoes. Same thing with Nike, by the way. But there are exceptions. Now, going back to the geographic nature, there is no such thing as a worldwide trademark.
Yeah, that was another thing that I was going to ask about.
Yeah.
The the copyright infringement overseas. And
Right.
How does that play into this whole equation?
So, unless you're a huge global company, right? So, for huge global companies, which is what I've spent the majority of my career working on, those multinational corporations, they have trademark registrations in each and every country of the world. So I've represented some of the largest brands on the planet, and I've worked in more than 150 countries around the world. Why?
Because you have to enforce them in every country, right?
Exactly.
It's all separate.
Exactly. So even though if people listening out there have trademarks and have registered them in countries outside of the United States, they may be confused because we have this office called the World Intellectual Property Organization based in Geneva, Switzerland.
Okay.
They do not handle worldwide trademark registrations. It is a clearing office for international trademarks.
Okay.
But still, you need to have a trademark. You should consider, and again, it's not for everyone because it's expensive.
That's another thing. So when is it right for you to go through that process?
When you are either producing product in another country, like you're a manufacturer and you have a co-packer production facility, say in China, or you intend to sell in another country.
Right.
So when you get ready to expand, right? So say you're selling clothing here in the United States and you intend to expand into Canada or into Mexico. Right. Now, just because you're online and you have clients who are buying from you in other countries, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to rush out and get a trademark because this is expensive business. Trademarks have to be renewed usually every 10 years. Every country has a different a different term.
And it's a different fee for every country.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a crazy amount of money, I'm sure, that it gets to.
Very, very expensive. And, you know, you have to police infringement.
Yeah.
You know, you have this duty to police. So it's
That's part of it too, isn't it?
Yes.
So what happens if you go through the whole process and you just let them go with it in China or whatever?
You can lose your rights.
You lose it.
Yeah.
So wow.
Yeah.
So you actually are forced. So it's another thing. You're forced to actually spend more money on fighting things to keep your patent.
Yeah, I mean, and so that's why when people call me and they say, so I'm being bullied, I got this cease and desist letter. Well, you're not being bullied. Trademark owners have an affirmative duty to enforce their rights. Wow. That doesn't mean you have to uncover every stone to find infringement. But if you become aware of something, right? If something's brought to your attention, even if you're just a moderately sized company, if you have a sales force and they bring something to your attention and you don't investigate it, you can lose your trademark rights if you don't police your mark. China's the Wild West still. I mean, China's a really difficult market, and enforcement is really expensive. Yeah. Unfortunately. So all of this needs to be taken into account as you're growing your business and setting aside a budget. I had a little bit of a debate with a small business owner on my LinkedIn page earlier this week. Okay. Clearly something had happened to him, and he's like, the whole system is rigged. Courts only give awards to people with money, and small business owners just can't get ahead. And I'm like, look, clearly something has happened to you, but judges do not make decisions based on who has more money. They follow the law. There certainly are some inconsistencies.
Sure, there's examples of everything.
Absolutely. I'm not at all here to say that every time I read an opinion, I go, wow, that one was decided well, because that doesn't happen. But to infer that decisions are made based on the size of a plaintiff or defendant's bank account is asinine. So clearly something happened to him, but I think he's missing the bigger point that unfortunately, trademark owners have a right to police, but the flip side of that, and I talk to my small business owner clients about this all the time, yeah, it probably isn't the right time for you to dip your toe into the trademark pool if you have zero money to enforce.
Right.
Now we can triage, we can figure out what makes sense, but you really don't want to send a cease and desist letter if you don't have the budgetary resources to back it up.
Now, what happens when you do that? What happens if you go and don't follow your advice and start sending letters to people? What happens?
I mean, they may test you. I mean, a lot of times, I mean, especially if the person the recipient of that letter is represented by counsel, they may tell you just to go pound sand the first time around just to see if you're serious. I mean, you look like you lose all credibility if you can't back it up.
Right.
When I discuss with my clients before we send a cease and desist letter is, okay, so what are we willing to do? What is our budget? What if they come back and say, go pound sand? Like, what if they send us, a letter back that basically says, F you, then what?
Yeah.
I mean, if you start getting a reputation for just sending letters and not backing them up, people are going to stomp on your IP rights everywhere, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be the little boy who cried wolf, right? You want to send letters when it really makes sense. And this goes for big clients as well. I mean, look, bigger clients are just like smaller clients. I know small clients don't think that. Large multinational companies are the same. It's just they have thousands, tens of thousands of people after them all the time.
Right.
But they also have to. They also have budgetary limits. They don't have unlimited resources. And so we would have to triage and figure out how to spend money all the time.
Yeah. Now, and there's no clear, this is going to cost this amount, right? I mean,
it depends. But no, when you're talking about litigation or pre-litigation, it's very difficult to know because you never know what the other side's going to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's it's so scary.
It's difficult, and I'll tell you the other thing that's even scarier is the whole counterfeit issue. So when you deal with counterfeit goods and anti-counterfeiting strategies, I mean, there's just those people are so evil and so awful, and they take such advantage of companies, especially large brand owners.
Yeah.
And so much is at stake. I know people think it's no big deal and, thank God they're sticking it to the man. Well, they're sticking it to all of us because
the prices go up on everything.
That's exactly right. And if you think about it, whether you're intentionally buying counterfeit goods or you're not aware that you're buying counterfeit goods, if you buy something that isn't performing as you expect, who are you going to complain to?
Right.
You're going to complain to the company that owns that brand. So it becomes a PR nightmare. They have to hire more people. And eventually that's all going to come back and be reflected in their price. But
Right.
when you buy counterfeit goods, you're basically funding terrorism and child labor, and these people don't pay taxes. I mean,
Of course.
this is the worst of the worst. And so trying to find these people is incredibly difficult for brand owners. And, it's a game of whack-a-mole. It's very, very difficult to shut these people down. And
I can imagine.
multi-millions of dollars are spent every year trying to find these people and do raids and, in China and Nigeria and, Turkey and India and all the hot spots of counterfeit goods. It's a really, really, really difficult issue for brand owners.
Oh yeah, it's a worldwide problem, definitely. Bringing it to the United States, there has to be some examples of that happening here.
Oh, there is. I mean, so when one of the benefits of being a federally registered trademark owner is if you are a purveyor of goods, you can register your trademark with Customs and Border Control. And so, you can have your goods stopped at the border So I worked on a case when I was a young associate where we had like computer parts or computer chips, I can't remember now, that were stopped at the border. And so, but part of the issue is that sometimes brand owners are hesitant to educate customs, and that really shouldn't be the case, because customs really is there to help you and support you, but they can't be experts in everything. So you really have to work in tandem with them and educate them. But it is ridiculous the amount of product that comes in every day. The issue now, though, is that so much is shipped through the mail.
Right. I was going to say this whole thing. I mean, we're not necessarily talking about just trucks of things, shipments of one thing anymore.
Yeah. So I think that's becoming a challenge for customs now. So.
And what are they going to do? I mean, if you have...
It's difficult. It's really difficult.
How are they going to know, right?
It's really difficult. So, which is why it's so incumbent on Amazon. I mean, that's why you have big brands pulling out of Amazon now.
Yeah. There's a lot of garbage, fake stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of
and
stuff.
It's their reputation. Mm-hmm. It's truly their reputation.
So, yeah, you brought up a good point with Amazon in particular, because there's so many things. One of the campaigns that they're doing right now is that it's not Amazon selling you these products, it's the small business owners on Amazon.
Yeah.
So that's like part of their branding now. Maybe that's damage control, actually.
I think they're trying to protect themselves a little bit.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
For that exact reason, now that I think of it. But what they do is you don't know what you're getting. You don't know where it's coming from. They slap the Amazon logo on it, and it's trusted. It could be poison. Who knows? There's plenty of things. I just got something in the mail the other day. I had a supplement that I was taking, and I got a email from Amazon and the FDA saying that this was recalled because of manufacturing inconsistencies, which I took a whole bottle of this stuff, and that happens, and it's...
You should be very careful with supplements and vitamins and all those types of things. Look, we have become the convenience, generation, right? Mm-hmm. We want it all. We want it all, we want it all delivered via Prime.
Yeah.
And, we don't want to go out to the store anymore. But supplements, vitamins, all those types of things, they can be very dangerous to purchase on Amazon. So when I give presentations on counterfeit goods, people are usually really shocked to learn that counterfeit prescription drugs, about a third of them in the world are counterfeit prescription drugs. We're not so affected by them here in the United States, but in Africa, for instance, about 60-70% of prescription drugs are counterfeit. And so the issue is that either they have no active ingredient or too much active ingredient. So, I mean, think about it, right? If you need a prescription drug to, cure whatever is wrong with you, and it's just a placebo, I mean...
You're killing people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So when I give that presentation, people are usually just astounded. But and think about other areas like aftermarket motorcycle parts or car parts.
Yeah.
If something is wrong with that part, it's a safety issue.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of manufacturers. Harley Davidson, who's not my client, has never been my client, but they do a really great job in trying to really crack down on counterfeiters. And there have been a number of articles in attorney trade magazines written about how they go after people, but they judiciously sue because it's expensive, but they go after big fish. And a few years ago, they got a really, really big judgment. And so they use that right for all of their other cease and desist letters to try to be intimidating, to try to get compliance, because their brand is very valuable. And they also know that counterfeit aftermarket parts can truly hurt people. And they're concerned about that. They don't want that to happen on their watch. And there's other, BMW has been very successful in suing people. Again, that's another brand that's really concerned about their reputation. So it's a real concern. Aftermarket airplane parts. I mean, can you imagine?
It's scaring me just to think about it.
It's scary
because they don't catch it all.
Right.
And that's a scary thing to think about.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I don't think that they ever will. They're never going to catch it all, because, like you said, it's whack-a-mole, and that, I guess, is part of. I mean, it's outside of. Now we're just talking about being scared, but why? I guess that's why it's important to have people like you to make these things safer across the board. You know, to protect the quality control and all that. And we've already done an hour, but believe it or not.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
But I wanted to cover some other things.
Okay.
I wanted to kind of, because we could talk about that for hours.
Sure.
So getting back to what you currently do for the small business owner.
Yeah.
Because this is a huge industry. Every brand has a need for these things.
Right.
But a lot of times, you mentioned it, the small business owner thinks, well, they either can't afford it or it's not for them. That's for the big, P&G and all that. At what time is it important for a small business owner to contact somebody like you?
Thank you. That's a great question. It's one of the reasons why I opened up my own firm, because I think that a lot of small business owners think that they just can't afford an attorney for issues like this, right? That's just out of their reach. So I think the right time is when a small business owner is forming a business and they know that they're really going to differentiate their business based on marketing, that they really want to have a brand, that they maybe want to have a logo, but that the brand is distinctive, right? That they're just not going to be Joe's Auto Shop. There's nothing wrong with being Joe's Auto Shop. That's great. But I can't help that person, right? So they want to have a cool brand name that was really going to position themselves different from their competitors. They don't have to have a real point of differentiation, meaning they don't have to have something unique about their business in terms of that it's patentable as an invention, just that they've created a marketable point of differentiation. If they've done that and they have an interesting name, that's the time to come see someone like me, to pick up the phone and call someone like me, and we can do a search on the name. Also, if they're launching a new product or a new service line, again, with an interesting and unique name, that's the time to talk to someone like me. So that's preventative. Then, as we sort of talked about throughout, if, God forbid, they get a letter from someone saying, hey, your name's a lot like my name and you need to stop using your name, don't panic. Certainly don't just give in, but give someone like me a call, or God forbid, if they get sued and they get a summons, don't feel like you have to go through that alone. Call someone like me, call an intellectual property attorney and find out what your options are.
Right.
You don't just want to default on a case like that. You want to see what your options are.
Absolutely.
So those are the ways usually, and we can search the name. We can figure out if it's truly available. We can help you register it, and just figure out what options you have available. Is it cheap? No. But is it expensive? No, it's not. The expensive part, as we were talking about, is what do you do after the certificate of registration? How do you enforce it? And someone like me can help you make sure that you're using it properly so that you have the protection that you need. So it's an incredibly nuanced area, as I hope we've kind of demonstrated today. It's not just, oh, well, the USPTO is online, I'll do it myself. It's probably not going to work out real well for you.
Probably not smart to just wing it,
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so you are actually working with newer lawyers. You just launched something recently. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, thanks. So lawyers have to do a lot of continuing education to keep our licenses current. So I do a lot of educating to other lawyers, and I like to share sort of practical tips. But one of the things that I noticed was missing in the market was a way for newer lawyers who really had an interest in trademark law to get a good understanding of all of the rules and regulations in this area and feel that they could get up to speed on all of the rules and regulations, and also have a practical application, because I came through the system in a very unique way coming in from the business side. So I launched a trademark academy for lawyers to help educate and mentor younger lawyers, and for those especially who don't have a support system of going into a big firm, or they work at a small firm, or they might be the only trademark attorney in their firm, or they hang up their own shingle, to have a support system. So I launched a trademark academy. It's an online trademark academy to help take them through our rule book and some of the practical tips and strategies in helping to guide clients, like we talked about earlier, just explaining to them, right, that, you know, our clients have business issues, right? And they're looking to us for a legal solution. So don't give them big, long legal, you know, research papers. Clients don't like that, right? You wouldn't like that. You'd be like, what is this? I don't know what to make of this.
Yeah.
Just,
it needs to be relatable and understandable.
yeah, just help me understand what it is that I need to do. So just kind of being a mentor for them, and helping to give them a toolbox of resources that can help them be successful in their own practice.
And that is called Trademark Abilities.
Yes, that's the name of the Trademark Academy.
Gotcha. And I'm sure, you know, if anybody's listening that is looking to learn more about this, they can go to trademarkabilities.com and also reach out to you. What's the best phone number to call you at?
So my office phone is 708-320-2033.
Okay. And, you know, for any questions that you have, I'm sure that if you don't handle it, you could point people in the right direction.
Absolutely.
That's a big thing. A lot of times just reaching out to somebody that kind of knows the lay of the land is very helpful. And to learn more about Stacey and what she does, check out her main website. That's klolegal.com.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And is there anything that you would like to leave the audience with, a word of advice or anything like that?
No, I mean, we had such a great conversation. I think, to your point, I have a really strong network of attorneys in all practice areas. So absolutely, I mean, feel free to reach out at any time. If I don't personally handle the question, I'm happy to find someone who does.
Absolutely. Well, it's a real pleasure. Like I said, these things go by so fast. There's never enough time to cover it, but I know your time is valuable, so I definitely appreciate everybody tuning in. Definitely give her a call if there's anything that she can help you with, and we'll be seeing you again soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.